right.
So, Ralph, let me ask this. Why does I-94 have to be an omnibus? Really, it's an 18-page bill. If we agree on all of these very minor measures, then why not start with the minor measures upon which we agree? Why is it loaded up like a shopping cart with measures with which a lot of people disagree?
What do you think it's loaded up? We're going to get into transfers, right?
Well, yes. I mean, the definition. I mean, I don't want to get into the weeds because we talked about this earlier. But yes, the definition of transfer is incredibly vague in the bill.
So a couple of things about transfers on that. And one, this bill was modeled after Oregon and California, which have had...
Being from California, it's worked beautifully.
Which has had... hundreds of thousands of background checks, and there hasn't been one instance of somebody put in jail for a transfer. Secondly, the key thing on a transfer is that you have to knowingly circumvent the law. In other words, you have to be a black market dealer, or otherwise you're not going to be criminalized for it. That transfer issue is put in there to affect this individual to gun show. So gun shows are private sales. You can sell a couple of guns, but you had black market dealers that were selling 50 AK-47s a session against the law. Those people should have been, by definition, federally licensed firearm dealers. So it's designed at some point to prevent the bad guys from doing it. It's not a gotcha. Nobody wants gotcha for the average everyday citizen put in jail. And it will not happen that way because we have precedent in California and Oregon.
Well, it should be. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about the precedent in California for a second. In California, there are 30,000 mentally ill people who have guns. They have a grand total of 33 people, really, in the state of California who are tasked with taking these 30,000 guns away from these 30,000 mentally ill people. Okay, we're creating a system that is either not going to be enforced or it's going to be over-enforced. This idea, if we can just trust the government, then why aren't we just trusting the government to do the right thing now? I don't understand why a piece of legislation makes them better at what they do. I mean, the government is not very good at what they're doing now. Why does new wording make them not suck?
Because part of the reason you have a law or initiative as a deterrent, that government won't even be involved, that the bad guys won't be going to gun shows to buy guns, so they have to circumvent it.
Well, but that's exactly the point. If bad guys are not going to gun shows with regard to Ebola, and for a second, this is a mild digression. With regard to Ebola, the federal government just made the case that they don't want a federal travel ban, right? Because they said if there's a federal travel ban, people will just find a way to circumvent the federal travel ban. Okay, do you see the analogy here?
Yeah, I'm not going there. I'm not going there. I'm here to talk about guns. And most people are law-abiding citizens on that. So, I think one of the reasons you have laws is a deterrent to make sure that people do the right thing.
Well, I agree, but this is the attendant cost, right? If there are law-abiding, the cost is a law-abiding citizen, for example, under the bill, who wants to loan a gun to a family member for purposes of defending themselves. The bill talks about it has to be in the case only of the most basically emergency situations. Well, how does the government define that? It's undefined in the bill. Right? I mean, so I have a cousin or I have a sister-in-law who feels endangered by her husband. If I give her the gun and she says, I feel endangered, and she keeps it for a week, but the government only decides that she was endangered for 3 days, and the gun is stolen and used, then she can be prosecuted, I can be prosecuted, as well as the criminal.
And you'll never be prosecuted. It's never happened.
So again, it comes down to faith in government.
You'll never be prosecuted. There's precedent here. You'll never be prosecuted. Use your best judgment and don't knowingly break the law.
Then why don't we just pass a referendum that says, please, prosecutors, do good stuff?
Let me do a follow-up.
Well, new questions about whether God is about to join the gun control debate after Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein invites a clergyman to speak at the news conference where she rolled out her assault weapons ban proposal. Reverend Gary Hall, the dean of the Washington National Cathedral, urging worshipers yesterday to unite in favor of gun control. Listen.
As people of faith, we have the moral obligation to stand with and for the victims of gun violence and to work to end it. I believe that the gun lobby is no match for the cross lobby, especially when we stand together as people of all faiths across the religious landscape of America. I don't want to take away someone's hunting rifle, but I can no longer justify a society that allows people other than military and police to own weapons like these, or that permits the sale of high-capacity magazines designed with the purpose of simply killing as many people as quickly as possible.
Joining me now, Ben Shapiro, a syndicated columnist. He's the editor-at-large for Breitbart News as well. And he is the author of Bullies, How the Left's Culture of Fear and Intimidation Silences America. Ben, good to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
This was an eye-opener. You know, it's not the first time we've heard clergy get involved in political debates, but wow, I mean, he came flat out and said, this is not a political issue, it's a religious issue. We who follow Jesus have to stand against guns. Your thoughts?
You know, he can say whatever he wants. The fact is that it's Dianne Feinstein and the Democrats who are trotting him out to make this basic argument, which is that if you oppose their gun control agenda, it's not because you really want to find a different way that doesn't, you know, wreck the rights of 300 million Americans to prevent things like Sandy Hook. It's because you're a bad person. It's because you don't care about what happened in Sandy Hook. When he opposes the gun lobby to the cross lobby, the implication is that you are a morally deficient human being if you don't support his political agenda. And this thug tactic has been the element that the left has been pushing for weeks now, months now. Everybody from President Bush to from President Obama down all the way to, you know, through the left media, they've been pushing the idea that there is something wrong with us, that we don't care if kids get killed if we don't agree with their gun control agenda, as opposed to let's have a reasonable discussion about how to prevent things like this.
What kind of reasonable discussions?
We saw President Obama say explicitly that the reason we're seeing lines around the block to get into gun stores now is because people who believe in gun rights are ginning up fears, trying to gin up their own ratings, trying to gin up their own revenues, and that's the reason. And then we saw him, when he called for gun control, flanked by young children who had written to the White House or whose parents had encouraged them to do so, but there was a question about whether that was appropriate and whether that was a message to people who don't feel as he does, that you are somehow against these children or not in favor of their safety.
Well, unfortunately, this is what the left has been doing over and over. The gun control debate is just the latest symptom of this. On the debt ceiling stuff, what they say is that if we disagree with them, it's because we only like rich people and hate poor people. On the gun control debate, they keep trotting out children as though we should be taking policy prescriptions from 7-year-olds. You know, it used to be in this country that when a president of the United States said, I'm dealing with this issue because, for example, my 13-year-old daughter cares about nuclear disarmament, we laughed at them. We laughed them out of the public sphere. Jimmy Carter comes to mind. When President Obama walks out there with a bunch of 7-year-olds and says, I'm doing it because these 7-year-olds, they care about gun control, give me a break. I mean, if we're taking our policy prescriptions from kids who can't spell either policy or prescription, we have a problem.
This particular Reverend, Gary Hall, he's at National Cathedral. I mean, a lot of our viewers know this, and this is a national icon. And he comes out and says, look, I was drawn to religion in the 60s by an activist, anti-war, anti-segregation chaplains who were raring to make a scene, and he believes he can do the same. This is from the Washington Post. He says, that message fueled a generation of progressive religion and activism, and he wants to get that going again today, saying what he wants to do is like guerrilla theater. I mean, is that what the future holds for us when we go to church on Sunday?
You know, I think that it does, because the left continues to politicize everything. I mean, if you look at what they say about the religious right, you know, I'm a religious person. I'm an Orthodox Jew. I'm not a Christian. But the left says that people like me, people who are, you know, observant Christians, those people are the American Taliban. But then they're happy to trot out people like this reverend to push their political position because he happens to be on their side. And not only that, we are against the Gospels, or we're against the Bible, or we're against common human decency. If we don't sign off on Dianne Feinstein's nonsensical gun ban, that wouldn't have stopped a single death at Sandy Hook.
And yet we have seen clergy take positions on what are both religious and political issues before. I mean, when Obamacare was passed, we had a lot of priests come on this show, and rabbis for that matter, and talk about how they believed it, and they still are talking about in court how they believe it infringes on their religious freedoms because it forces them or religious organizations to cover contraception and other items that they object to morally and religiously. And we've obviously seen priests from the pulpit talk about pro-life, and they clearly believe that abortion is murder and so on. So there are some issues that have a foot in both camps.
They do. This doesn't happen to be one of them. This is a case where we all want to prevent people from getting killed, innocent people from getting killed. But the problem is that it's only the left that says our policy prescriptions are better than yours morally. That your end goal is not the same as ours. They say our end goal does not include saving lives. Our end goal only includes preserving gun rights at the expense of human life. And that's a character assassination argument, not a political one. If they really want to get something done in Washington, if they really want the American people to go along with their agenda, they should stop demagoguing and claiming that there's something wrong with us, that we're evil, if we disagree with them about how to preserve the lives of people like the kids at Sandy Hook.
Yeah. You know, I think about that one family, what's her, little Christina Green, who was killed in the same shooting massacre that led to Gabby Giffords being shot. And her father came on this broadcast shortly thereafter. It was right after. And he is not a big gun control guy, but his wife is. So it's in the same family with suffering the same tragedy, obviously concerned about the lives of children, but they just had legitimate disagreements on the issues and where to go from it. And even this gentleman, the Reverend Gary Hall, he also acknowledges that even clergy is divided on this issue, and yet you wouldn't quite have picked that up if you listened to him yesterday. Ben, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'll see you soon.
Things that I hate. Amy Schumer has now put out a new video on guns. Amy Schumer is the gal who recently was on the cover of, I can't remember which magazine it was. It was one of the women's magazines. And it was a picture of her setting her Vahuhu on fire. Which is what syphilis will do to you, by the way. And she also is a far leftist who pushes anti-gun routine. So she did this anti-gun routine. This is her routine of selling guns. This is what she thinks this is why she thinks right-wingers buy guns. Here we go. Amy Schumer.
Now, speaking of perfect gifts, now this is a no-brainer, all right? Now, this is a gun. Just your regular, run-of-the-mill meat and potatoes handgun. Now, how cute is that?
I love that.
Can we can pick it up? Oh, heavy.
Can I see this?
You can hold it, sure.
Wow.
Look at that. Wow.
It's like a toy, but it's extremely real.
Yeah, and now here is what's great about this. Now, pretty much anyone can purchase this. Okay?
Oh, my God. This is so fun. I
It's
love
fun.
this.
Hey, lady, give me all your money and your makeup.
Oh, my God. So fun. And it's on sale now. Call in. Oh, we got a call.
Oh, caller.
Hey, did I miss the Steve Irwin coins?
Oh, yeah, you did.
You sure did,
I'm
honey,
sorry.
but that's okay.
You want a gun?
Oh, no, I could never get a gun. I have several violent felonies.
Oh, no.
Caller, you bite your tongue, you silly goose. You can absolutely get a gun if you have several felonies, as long as you buy it on the internet or at a gun show. And caller,
none of these things are true.
Guess
Okay, what's so bad about this? First of all, it's bad comedy because it's not funny in any way. But beyond that, every element of this is false. All of the things about this are false. It's actually not that easy to buy a gun. You have to be over a certain age. They do a background check on you. Every federally licensed firearms dealer has to do a background check for felonies. If you buy a gun over the internet, it has to be shipped to a federally licensed firearms dealer. You then have to go to that federally licensed firearms dealer for a background check. The gun show loophole is not a real thing. Okay, real firearms dealers at a gun show still have to do a background check on you. The so-called gun show loophole is if I sell a gun to Lindsay. Okay, that's not a gun show loophole. That's a private party purchase loophole. Okay, it's a different thing. And there's been no evidence that private party purchases like that are what are leading to any sort of spike in gun crime. In any case, you wouldn't expect intelligence from a woman who sets her vagina on fire to show the world what a